A recently published paper in the physics journal AIP Advances has proposed something that is almost unbelievable. The paper is titled Universal Consciousness as a Foundational Field. In other words, it's suggesting that consciousness might not be produced by the brain, it might be a fundamental aspect of reality itself. What makes this idea fascinating is that it echoes what mystics have been saying for thousands of years. Across cultures and traditions, people have had the same insight, that beneath this apparent world of diversity, beneath the countless forms and objects, there is one underlying reality. In the Upanishads, it's called Brahman. In Taoism, they call it the Tao. In Buddhism, it appears in teachings of emptiness and dependent origination. And science has always dismissed these things as being purely philosophical. But as physics has dug deeper, the picture that we're seeing has started to look far more strange. This paper is speculative, and it's philosophical, and it's kind of controversial, but the fact that this idea is being discussed in a mainstream physics journal is interesting in itself, because it shows that some scientists are starting to take seriously what mystics have been talking about for thousands of years, the possibility that consciousness is fundamental to reality. The author of the paper, Maria Strømme, proposes that consciousness might not be produced by the brain. It might be a fundamental field of the universe, just like the electromagnetic field or the Higgs field. In modern physics, fields are the most basic building blocks of reality. Particles are not tiny objects, they are disturbances in fields. For example, a photon is a vibration in the electromagnetic field, and an electron is a vibration in the electron field. So the paper asks a provocative question. What if consciousness is a field? And what if individual minds are excitations in this field of consciousness? In other words, each one of us would be like a wave in a vast field of consciousness. Let me just pick out some of the mind-blowing parts of this paper. So this paper presents a novel framework that integrates consciousness with fundamental physics. It builds upon insights from quantum field theory and non-dual philosophy. Now listen to this. The concept of universal consciousness before the Big Bang is central to this framework. In this state, reality exists as a timeless and undifferentiated potential, without space, time, or matter. And then she goes on to explore this with mathematical representation. So this is not just philosophical, she is building a mathematical framework. She goes on to say that thought may initiate the collapse of universal consciousness into differentiated states, guiding the emergence of individual and collective realities, really explaining how we can go from this universal consciousness into what we experience today as individual selves. So, and this is a key part, thought not only shapes perception, but also actively participates in the very act of creation and differentiation. Now, with the collapse of universal consciousness into differentiated states initiated by universal thought, space-time and matter emerge as observable aspects of reality. This idea flips the usual scientific assumption on its head, because usually the story goes like this. Matter comes first, then brains are produced, and then brains produce consciousness. But Strømme's proposal reverses this. It says consciousness comes first, and space, time, and matter emerge from it. Again, this is speculative, but the conceptual shift is fascinating because it echoes what the non-dual traditions have been saying for thousands of years. In the Upanishads, there is the famous statement, consciousness is Brahman, meaning consciousness is the ultimate reality behind the universe. In Advaita Vedanta, the world is seen as an appearance within awareness rather than something separate from it. So when a modern physicist suggests that consciousness might be a fundamental field, it sounds remarkably similar to these ancient insights. This shows that different ways of exploring reality, scientific exploration and contemplative insight, can sometimes converge on similar conclusions. So why are physicists even exploring something like this? One reason is that consciousness is still a mystery. We still don't understand how subjective experience arises from matter. This is often called, as I'm sure you've probably heard, the hard problem of consciousness. You can map every neuron in the brain, you can track electrical signals, but this still doesn't explain why there is an experience at all. Why does brain activity lead to this feeling on the inside? Why isn't it just mechanical processing? Some scientists and philosophers have started to wonder whether the reason the problem exists is because we are starting from the wrong assumption. Maybe consciousness isn't something that emerges from matter. Maybe matter emerges from consciousness. That idea might sound crazy to many people, but it is one way of dissolving the hard problem of consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental, then experience doesn't need to be explained as something that appears later. It was there from the beginning. Many physicists do remain skeptical about this idea, and that's good because skepticism is critical to science. We need to develop and move forward through testing and real scientific research. But what makes this moment fascinating is that the questions that scientists are starting to ask resemble the questions that mystics have always asked. What is the fundamental nature of reality? Is the universe made of objects or relationships? Is consciousness something inside the brain or something more universal? These are no longer purely philosophical questions. They are appearing at the forefront of physics and neuroscience and cosmology. This paper highlights that the boundary between science and philosophy is becoming more fluid, and the idea that reality might be fundamentally unified, something that mystics have long talked about, is now being explored in new ways. If you found this video interesting and you want to hear more about the intersection between physics and non-dual wisdom, then watch this video next.